Honorable Sir Charles Michael Dennis Byron, retired President of the Caribbean Court of Justice, Honorable Chief Justice Madame Roxanne George Wiltshire, Senior Counsel, Honorable Judges, esteemed guests, friends, ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pleasure that I stand here this evening to share a few words and insights into the evolution of what we regard as a truly Guyanese institution, the firm of Hughes, Fields, and Stoby. I personally have always had a deep and nascent association with this firm for as long as I can remember, because its founding member was none other than Russell told you, my godfather, Clarence Albert Fitzgerald Hughes. And he and my father, Brynmore, are lifelong friends. And as Russell had also given you an insight into there were conversations about what would constitute a suitable or appropriate firm from an emerging colonial entity. These conversations began in London when Bryn and Clarence were students. They were law students nominally, and they roomed at Hans Crescent in Knightsbridge, London, or simply Hans Crescent as it was known to its denizens. And I see you smiling knowingly. It's clearly familiar to you. Clarence and Bryn both immersed themselves in the many joys of life in London. During their sojourn there, Bryn and Clarence made many fast and dear friends who themselves remained lifelong friends. Henry DeBakey Ford, Robert Bobby Muirhead, Carl Hudson Phillips, Alistair McIntyre, Victor Page, and Ivan Chin, to name but a few of them. Ivan Chin was sometimes the leader of the band because he was a Calypsonian and fete organizer extraordinaire. Apparently, Clarence and Bryn were all reading for what would now be a major in law and a slightly lesser minor in party-going, revelry, and high living. It's no wonder that when they returned to their respective territories, all of these gentlemen applied themselves furiously to the law as a compensation for having so sadly and shabbily neglected it not so long ago. Bryn and Clarence were great lovers of music and dancing, and apparently the denizens of Hans Crescent devoted themselves to literally dancing the night away. I've been told their parties went until daylight. There is an old story in the Pollard and Hughes family about Bryn's sister Magda, Auntie Mag, who had recently gone up to study in Scotland and was visiting Bryn in London. Magda was appalled and asked, "Is this all you young men do?" To which the rejoinder was that the trains didn't begin to run again until early next morning, so they were all stranded and they may as well enjoy themselves. Clarence and Bryn had a dream which had arisen. They thought long and hard and philosophized about the ideal law firm. And they resolved to return to Guyana to practice law together. They saw this as the perfect culmination of a deep friendship and an abiding passion, both shared for the law. Bryn graduated from Gray's Inn in 1957. He returned first to British Guyana and was admitted to the practicing bar in November of 1957. Clarence graduated from the Inner Temple and returned to Guyana in 1958 when he was admitted to the bar. Although their dream of founding a firm and practicing law together was very much in the forefront of their young minds, they were not to quite realize this ideal, as they were lured into very different pathways of the law by their respective inclinations. Bryn's inclinations were different to Clarence's. He had done a master's degree in public international law, which was a love that remained with him all his life. He was also drawn to legislative drafting, which led him to read for a second master's degree at NYU. And Clarence, meanwhile, for his first love was commercial law, and he had firmly resolved to establish the premier commercial practice in Guyana. Britain's aptitude for legislative drafting, indeed his penchant for it, was recognized by none other than another good friend of theirs, Sonny Ramphel, Sir Surendranath Ramphel, who was the then newly independent Guyana's first Attorney General. He invited Britain to join the Attorney General's chambers, where before long Britain found himself as the Chief Parliamentary Counsel. Meanwhile, Clarence continued to develop his commercial practice. Although they still cherished the ideal of practicing together, they were two such eminently practical men that after a while it must have dawned on even them that this would now be rather unlikely. What did emerge, however, was a testimony to the depth and strength of their friendship as they shared a bottomless interest in each other's legal strivings and endeavors. They would consult with each other on weekdays, Sundays, public holidays, and late at night, seeking each other's point of view on legal matters which were engaging their respective attentions. Bryn and Clarence would spend hours and hours on some days testing views on various points of law. The case of Andy Mitchell and others versus the Director of Public Prosecutions in 1989, a case in Grenada in which Clarence was lead counsel, led to a deep collaboration between himself and Bryn in the area of international law, specifically the doctrine of necessity, which was a central theme in that case. Clarence would tell their intimates that Bryn's insights and depth of knowledge were invaluable to him while advising his clients in Grenada. The Andy Mitchell case is the locus classicus on the law of necessity in the Commonwealth Caribbean, and the judgment was informed and assisted in large part by the scholarship and dedication of these two men. Clarence did achieve his dream of establishing first-rate commercial chambers with another lifelong friend of his, Richard Barclay Fields, or Dick as he was affably known. Dick enjoyed an illustrious educational pedigree. His father was the redoubtable Eric Ivanhoe Fields, who was the chief education officer for the entire county of Essequibo, which was no mean feat in those days because only sons of the mother country normally aspired to such lofty heights. Perhaps because of this lineage, Dick was, I believe still is, the youngest member ever to be admitted to one of Guyana's premier institutions, the Queen's College of Guyana, at the tender age of 9 years old. He was a diligent student and an outstanding athlete, and he won several school colors. Dick was also a Queen's College cadet, which had him enlisting in the British Guyana Volunteer Force. And he eventually attained the rank of second lieutenant. He studied law at Graves Inn in London and was called to the bar of the United Kingdom in 1967 and returned to Guyana the same year. Dick, through his father, had already enjoyed a very congenial relationship with Clarence, and his father had suggested that they may be interested in practicing together upon Dick's return. Dick began his own professional practice in chambers at the First Federation Life Building, but the affable relationship with he and Clarence quickly developed into a fast friendship, and the two decided to practice law together. They established chambers, as Russell shared with you, in the Dummett property at 62 Hatfield and Cross Streets, which is immediately to the north of us. Almost immediately after, they were joined by a young, energetic barrister, Robin Stoby. Robin Stoby's father, Eric Stoby, was one of the leading commercial agents and manufacturers representatives in Georgetown, indeed in the colony at the time. He was also one of Clarence's earliest commercial clients. And upon Robin's return, Eric Stoby asked Clarence to undertake the nurturing of his young son into a barrister at law in Clarence's chambers. With this, the firm's final evolution into Messrs. Hughes, Fields and Stoby, Barristers at Law, was forged in September 1972, 50 years ago. As Russell also pointed out before me, there were many naysayers. Some sought to dissuade the three with observations that they were too far from the hurly-burly of the Supreme Court and they would starve for clients. Others cautioned a little more negatively that three red men could not look to establish and carve out a substantial commercial space in Guyana's color and class, the fractious atmosphere of Guyana's color and class, which prevailed at the time. Clarence, Dick, and Robin ignored them resolutely, and Hughes, Fields, and Stoby went from strength to strength. The three developed a reputation for diligence, scholarship, meticulous research, and a bottomless capacity for hard work. As their reputation spread, their practice expanded until the formerly sedate Dummett property at 62 Hatfield and Cross Streets was a busy throng of clients seeking commercial excellence. They were joined by Clarence's nephew, the erstwhile Stephen Glanville Newton Fraser, in 1985. Stephen was a maverick, as still is. He was the first member of the firm who had not been educated at the Inns of Court, but was a product of the equally excellent University of the West Indies, Cave Hill campus in Barbados, and the Norman Manley Law School, where his uncle was the principal. This first was repeated 2 years later in 1987 when yours truly joined the firm. Like Stephen, I attended the University of the West Indies at Cave Hill in Barbados and Norman Manley Law School in Jamaica. The following January, Stephen and I were joined as juniors by one Nigel Anthony Clarence Hughes, who had just returned from London. I suspect that Nigel deliberately delayed his departure from London by enrolling in a master's program. Unfortunately, it was only 18 months long, and eventually he had to wend his way homeward regretfully. Somewhat nostalgic for the jazz clubs and the avant-garde life in London. Maybe it's a demonstration, ladies and gentlemen, of the circle of life, because Nigel almost identically completed the same circle that his father had begun 30 years earlier. Hughes, Fields, and Stoby was now the largest firm in Georgetown with 6 lawyers. We were soon joined by a 7th, Elizabeth Dean Hughes, who graced the courts with her presence for the first few years, but was eventually unable to disregard the siren call of developing her talents as an artist, which she did in a studio upstairs across the road, across Cross Street. Stephen left the firm in 2008 to start his own firm, Fraser and Hoosty, with another good friend, Taney Hoosty. Although they're our dear rivals, we do find avenues to cooperate and collaborate, and when we do, we always achieve very successful results. I have always had an affinity for mining and extractive resources law, and I was fortunate enough to come into practice just with the advent of the new Mining Act in 1989. This new act introduced a number of different and novel approaches towards mining, and I spent many pleasurable hours devising cost-effective and efficient solutions for our clients' legal problems in this area. This experience has positioned us ideally, I believe, for the game changer that is occurring with the development of Guyana's new hydrocarbon economy. We have been fortunate enough to have attracted the goodwill of most of the major participants in this brand new area of endeavor. Nigel and I have risen to be co-heads of firm, but he has had the singular vision to open an office of the firm in Houston, Texas, just in time to be of service to the petroleum clients. But I will let him tell you about that and related things, as he will share with you some of our vision and plans for the future. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been my distinct pleasure to share with you these few rude thoughts and insights into the past and present of this so Guyanese institution, Hughes Fields and Stoby, which is 50 years today. Thank you.